This is Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mark. Scott Crow. Wow. This episode goes everywhere. Music is just one part of the wild story that is the life of Scott Crow. It began growing up as the son of George Jones's drummer. He grew up around the insanity that was Dee-Doodle and Tammy Wynette. So, to rebel, Scott got into heavy metal and started playing in bands at the age of 12. All of this changed when he discovered Mark Stewart and The Maffia, though. Suddenly, he was obsessed with electronic and experimental music. After his industrial band Lesson 7 gained traction touring with the biggest names in the genre, Scott walked away from everything and went into antiques. That could be the end of the story, but it's not even close. As Scott gets deeper into activism, he sold his antiques business, started the Common Ground Collective, and was listed as a domestic terrorist. During that time, he wrote some books and toured doing speaking engagements, and he tells me how that actually got him back into music. But he discovered a completely different approach to writing songs, cannibalizing all kinds of work to create something new. Check out eMERGENCYHeARTS.com to learn about the almost endless stream of projects Scott's working on, and to get all the social media links for everything. There's some really exciting stuff out there with some stellar artists that you'll definitely recognize. Follow us at Performance ANX on social media, and you can support us on ko-fi.com/performance anxiety with a cup of coffee, or performanceanx.threadless.com for merch. Now buckle the F up for a wild ride with Scott Crow on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Scott Crow. Take two. This is Scott Crow, the Dirty Anarchist from fucking shit. Take three. Scott Crow, Hey, this is Scott Crow on the Performance Anxiety with Mark Shea. Remember me? I'm the Dirty Anarchist from Austin, Texas. Run eMERGENCYHeARTS.com in Austin, and part of Lesson 7, Audio Assault, and Corporate Uncle. And fuck, it's just a stick in the mud rather than that. Enjoy Performance Anxiety as we have. Okay. Put some music and some swooshes behind it and stuff. Okay. Is that good enough? Is that gonna do it? Okay.
Hey.
Look at it. We made it.
We did it.
We're doing it. Shit, man. So sorry it's taking so long.
No, man. No worries. Man. You can't really, predict what, losing power and having a ridiculous ice storm and.
Exactly.
So no worries, man. No worries at all.
Thank you.
Oh gosh, my pleasure.
Let me close this door real quick. I want to close this door. Hang on, you guys coming in? My damn dogs. They want to come in. They want to go out. So,
mine are upstairs, locked in a room right now.
Oh, good on them. I'm going to turn the fan up so you don't have to hear it. Jeez,
no worries, man. No worries.
Thanks for taking the time to do this, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, gosh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
And can we cuss on this show?
Absolutely.
Oh, fuck yeah, because I probably will by accident.
No worries, man. No worries. I know you've got a new release coming up, but, there's a whole history before that.
That's true. I actually have 5 albums out this year. Just know that. So I don't fucking care about talking about I really want to talk about other shit and the label. Like, so if you don't talk about the songs, I don't give a fuck. Okay. Like, if you want to talk about other shit, like rock and roll stories and stuff like that, I'm good with that. So
that's awesome. I mean,
terrorism, anarchy, like the whole fucking thing. Anyway, we can make it interesting.
Oh, it'll definitely be interesting. I'm already getting that vibe. So this will be great. The way I normally start this whole thing is to find out how you got into music in the first place. I mean, so is it something that you grew up with, or was it something you found on your own? Was there a lot of music in the house growing up?
Yes. Yeah. All of those things.
Nice.
So I grew up in minor country music royalty. My dad was the drummer for George Jones and Tammy Wynette for about 25 years.
Wow.
So I grew up like all the time like George and Tammy, I thought were in my family and their kids, because I saw them all the time. And there was a touring, like all the touring guys with them and stuff. So that's how I actually grew up, was like, I grew up in a lot of country music. I'm a working class kid from a rural town that became a suburb much later after I was gone. You know, I watched the farm town turn into suburbs with, you know, like, oh, they tore down the farm.
Yep.
It was the way of storytelling that I grew up in. And then from that, you know, so understand, my dad was an asshole. He was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and he was mean.
Wow.
So it wasn't like it was like hunky dory. And he was like, hey man, let's show you how to do this stuff. But I was like, I want to be a drummer when I was like 9 or 10 or something. And he gave me one of his early drum kits, which was cool as hell to do. It was an old Ludwig Pearl snap set that was like beautiful, but it was beat up and stuff. And it was his like second kit or whatever. Okay. But he gave it to me and then proceeded to show me how to use it, and was such an asshole about it. It went awry quickly.
Oh no.
So oh man, it's fine. It's just stories, you know. And then he went to prison for 20 years. So, and I had nothing to do with him in his life. He's his own country song. He's dead now. Wow. But has affected me so much. But that's my introduction to that. And so I grew up meeting people like Ronnie Millsap, the Statler Brothers, Johnny Cash, and Dolly Parton, and Porter Wagner. I mean, that list goes on, because I saw them at all these festivals, because they weren't very famous. They were famous in these country worlds, but they weren't famous. You know, they weren't big. Johnny Cash was probably one of the biggest ones or whatever. But so I saw these people a lot. And and then after that, it was just like, for me, it was really like, I want to play drums. I want to be better than my dad. Fuck that motherfucker.
Right.
That's what I said. And so I joined a bunch of cover metal bands and stuff. And I discovered rock and roll when I was about 10 or 11. Wow. And I want to thank my mom too. I like, you know, like you can tell the shithole dad story a lot, right? But like, that's a common trope. Right. But my mom was fucking awesome, man. She was great. Oh, good. She like started taking me to concerts when I was really young, because she was like trying to break out of the country mold, because we're all like rednecks from Texas. You got to understand this, right? Okay. Like probably like unlike most of the people that you fucking meet, like we're totally rednecks from Texas, man. And so she was like, I want to break out of this. And so it's like she was taking me to concerts like in the 70s, like Neil Diamond and John Denver. And I saw the Village People in 77 with Gloria Gaynor and all these people like that. Like I loved them. I wanted to see the Village People. And then I saw Kiss in 77 and I was like, oh my God, rock and roll. So, and then I saw them again in 79 and I saw the Cars. And so anyway, so a lot of that stuff. And so by the time I was about 12 or 13, I wasn't a prodigy, but I just started playing in bands. They were shitty bands and they were cover bands, but I started doing that. And so, and that was kind of my discovery of music and moving from country to rock and roll and then trying to figure things out, you know, if that's, that kind of gets to work, you know.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Before you skip over this ad, give me 1 minute. Like most podcasts, I pick sponsors carefully and I use the products that advertise here. Pure Spectrum CBD is a product that has been really beneficial for me. They have a wide variety of great products that can be used on a daily or as needed basis. I've been using the tincture every day and it's been wonderful for easing anxiety. And I absolutely love the isolate. I use it instead of acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and it's worked so well for the relief of aches and pains. They also have soaks, lotions, salves, gummies, and more, plus an entire line for fitness recovery. They even have products for your pets. See everything they offer at purespectrumcbd.com. And if you have questions, they're there to help. They helped me when I had no idea where to start. After you fill your cart, use code PERFORMANCEANX for 15% off your purchase. Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD. So the first question I got to ask you about all of this is, have you listened to Cocaine and Rhinestones at all?
Fuck yeah!
All right.
Are you fucking kidding me?
So,
oh my God!
So is it accurate?
Nobody listened to it, lived it as a child.
Is Tyler on? Is he spot on with that?
I think so in a lot of ways, actually. You know, it's super funny that you bring that up at all.
I love that podcast.
Way to dig deep.
Yeah.
I think so too. And also, what was it that the guy who did King of the Hill also did a little series about road trip stories or something. He did the first season he did was country. It was Judd Hill. I'm sorry,
Mike
King
Judge.
of the Hill. Mike Judd, thank you.
Yeah.
He's from Texas too, so he fucking gets it. So he did the first season was all country. I'm like, oh, I recognize those stories. But those guys who were telling the stories, I'm like, those guys came way after those stories were happening. I remember when George Jones was that drunk.
What?
I remember when he would look at me as a child and go, because I can't speak. Too many drugs. And people are walking him on stage.
Oh, God.
I mean, it was kind of traumatizing as a child, but it's great stories now.
Oh, yeah. But I can only imagine what's got to be going through your mind as a kid.
I mean, I remember Tammy Wynette like having a birthday party at their house in Florida, which was like a mansion. It was like colonial columns and like all this super white trash shit that I see now. But at the time I was like, oh my God, this is fancy.
Yeah.
And they had a pool and stuff. And then a stage in their back. They were on acres. I mean, I ain't got a kid. They were on acres. And, you know, they were doing a concert, like my dad and all the people. And Porter Wagner drugged me up on the stage to sit next to him while he played the piano and stuff. And I did that, you know, because I'd seen him on TV. I was like, Porter Wagner. You know, it's just goofy shit like that.
Ballad of 40
Oh,
bucks.
my God. Yeah, exactly.
I love that song. So you kind of, all right, so you end up moving away from country music due in a large part to your mom. So was metal and heavier music just kind of, was it a rebellious thing, or was it something that actually drew you besides just screw dad? I'm gonna.
No, it totally drew me. I mean, like it was like the Who and Zeppelin and the Stones and like all the classic rock stuff. Yeah. And I joined my first band at like 12, 13. Wow. And most of those guys, I was 12, and those guys were like, probably 17 was the youngest guy, and the redneck, you know, the singer was like 25. I was a young guy. Again, I ain't going to pretend I was a prodigy, but I was a drummer. And they were like, hey, it's a drummer. He's alive. Let's get it. You know, so we practiced in his garage for years, doing Airport Freeway. Just know that's the band.
Oh, nice.
You know, we're doing like Thin Lizzy and Judas Priest and Scorpions and stuff. But I'm like learning my chops and learning how to work with people and stuff. And we, you know, the band never went anywhere. And then I went to, you know, like I had a succession of bands like that. But I joined metal because, like in Texas, like at that time, so you're talking about like 80 to like 82 or 3 or 4. Okay. Like metal was big. It wasn't even hair metal yet. That was starting to come up, but it was still like Black Sabbath and Ozzy. I saw Ozzy 4 times. I've seen him with 4 different guitarists. Oh, man. I saw Randy Rhoads. I saw Jakey Lee. I saw, you know, like I've seen them all. Wow. Like, and I wasn't like a fanboy. I just saw them because that's what I did. And so, like, you have to understand, too, between the ages of 8 and about 17, I went to 200 rock concerts, man. I saw Van Halen 4 times. I saw Ted, you know, like shitty bands like Ted Nugent, Styx, Journey, all these bands. So I learned a lot. Billy Squier, Queen, like I saw all of them. Wow. And I was like, this is the good thing I want to take. This is the bad thing. Don't do this. So I'm learning all along the way. Yeah. It was almost like school anyway, for you. I don't know if it was. And, you know, and I finally left metal bands in 85. I started to do electronic because I'd already been into new wave by that time, even though I was still listening to metal. I mean, again, like we didn't like go like, you can only listen to new wave. I was considered a fag, you know, in Texas for sure. I got thrown in the trash can for liking new wave. But I started going to clubs at 15. I was like, holy shit! My head exploded. And the kids in high school still didn't understand that stuff. They were still like, metal concerts, rock concerts. I'm like, no, man, this whole thing called clubs. It's cool. There's so many bands. You don't even know who they are. So what drew you into the electronic music and pulled you a little bit, you know, started to pull you away from metal? Was there a band or was it something else? Well, there's a couple of things. That, like, and I can say this in retrospect, I couldn't tell you it then, but like, I started going to clubs. I had a fake ID. Drinking age was only 18 then. So like it was easier to, like if a 15-year-old showed up with a shitty fake ID, it was easier to get in. Right. And I was a cool kid. And so like I was a weird outsider in high school, but they're like, yes, you're a regular. Come on in. So, but something happened in Texas though. There's a few really good record stores in Dallas. There's 2 or 3 of them that were Record Gallery, VVV Records, and Bill's Records that were really strongholds. And the clubs became centers for the Stark Club opened. Philippe Stark designed a club in 1985, which was his first club to ever do. And you're like, who the fuck is that? He's a huge designer, like every toilet paper and fucking pens and buildings and all kinds. He's an architect, but he did a club in 1985 that was cool as shit, and it was co-owned by Grace Jones and Stevie Nicks. I didn't know this stuff, but I'd go there and I saw Grace Jones perform. I was like, my head's exploded. I'm not saying that she was the most influential thing, but I'm just saying, like, I was being exposed to this kind of stuff. And then something weird happened, that Texas became a pipeline for all this industrial and experimental music coming out of Wax Trax Records out of Chicago, Network Records out of Canada, Played Against Sam Records out of Belgium, and a few other labels. And so for some reason, they, like, a lot of bands would come from Europe, play in the East Coast, West Coast, and they'd play Chicago and Texas. And so all of a sudden, I started to see all these bands. Like, again, I don't understand that this is happening, but this is starting to influence me in all this way. And this place called Record Gallery, I began to meet people. And the guy who ran the Record Gallery, Steve Stokes, he's passed on now to the ancestors, but he was a great person. He was very much into experimental music, and he was at the forefront of doing this stuff. And so it became a little hub of places for weirdos to get together and, like, huff ether and drink at underage and listen to music, like at a cool upstairs, an upstairs record store. Okay. And he had a lot of shows. I did my first shows there, my first experimental shows. But the two bands, and this is to the question, two records from them in 1984 at Record Gallery that blew my mind, because I didn't even understand what the records were. It was vinyl records, but they were in these covers. You're like, what the fuck is this thing? All right. Who are these people?
We had a little bit of a glitch there. Who was it? Because you froze for a second.
Soviet France. Soviet France.
Okay.
Yeah, and they had two records that came out, and they were like probably limited edition. They had handmade the covers, hand printed. One was covered in like asphalt and stuff, and one was covered in like rubber with all these crazy inserts. I mean, this is like shit just so outside of the thing of anything that you're doing. And so that really inspired me, and they were doing ambient noise. And so actually, when I left metal, that in 1985, I studied at North Texas University for less than a year, but I was there, and I got exposed to a lot of experimental music more, and jazz, because it's a big jazz school. Okay. And so Soviet France, it just had a lot more meaning to me, a lot more weight. And so I did, while I was there, I did this crazy experimental record under the name Corporate Uncle with this friend of mine, Rob Foreman, at the time. Okay. And so I'm talking about noise, like just total noise. And then I left, like I literally failed out of college within about 8 months, because I wasn't even going to class. I was just going to the experimental classes, a few philosophy classes, taking acid and smoking a lot of weed. I was like, holy shit, this is all I need, which is why I failed out, just so kids don't do this at home. Right. So I was like, I wanted to be a rock star. And so I left, and then I started working at a record store in 1985 also, like about the end of 85, I started working at a record store, 86. And I discovered Mark Stewart and Maffia there. And Mark Stewart was legendary. But even then, to that point, I didn't even know who he was yet. Like, so this is the first exposure to me. Again, remember, I'm a redneck in a small town working in a record store trying to figure shit out. So we're getting these import CDs and stuff. And I found this Mark Stewart cassette, and my head exploded, because it was Mark Stewart Maffia, which, just to give context, Maffia was Tackhead. It's Doug Wimbush, Keith LeBlanc, and Skip. I totally forgetting Skip's last name. I feel like an asshole. Sorry, Skip. So anyway, and they were the Sugar Hill Gang, which I'd grown up on hip hop also from 1980 and listened to the Sugar Hill Gang, The Message, and all these songs that they were playing on it. So it was the same guys. I didn't know this at the time, but that record just showed me that you could mash up anything, sounds and dub and electronic, and you could cut the detritus of the media at the time and start to make new things out of it. And again, I know this sounds like I'm making it sound bigger than it is, but it's just evolutionary steps for a fucking teenager in Texas, you know?
Yeah.
And that just kind of started leading me down the path. And Revolting Cocks came out in 86, and then Ministry Twitch came out in 86. Yep. And so those records started to influence me, and Floodland came out in 86 or 87. And so these records started to influence me. Clan of Zymox had come out. And so all these dark wave and industrial bands. And I had been exposed to punk rock a lot between about 83 and 85. I'd gone to many shows, but it never... the anti-authoritarian nature of it never spoke to me as much. Like, I didn't feel that anger and the angst and stuff. I danced and I and did all the things, but it was like, I didn't feel, but industrial, fucking, I felt like I came home. Okay. It was sound collage. It was just fucking, it was so much there.
It's amazing how different music will have the same effect on so many different people. You know, it's amazing, because I was getting that with metal back in the 90s or in the 80s, and then grunge in the 90s.
Right. And I did to degrees. I think metal definitely had this anti-authoritarian edge, even as it mainstreamed back in the 70s to the 80s. Yeah. I felt that about a lot of bands, you know, like Metallica was fucking super forward at the time. Slayer was super forward at the time.
I
remember when metal guys hated them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So it's funny because even like this past weekend, we're driving around, me and my wife and one of my kids and all, and an Iron Maiden song comes on, and it brought me right back to that feeling, and it was insane. I'm like, I remember. Yeah, it was just crazy. Oh, and I looked up. It's Skip McDonald.
Skip McDonald. Thank you so much. Skip McDonald was Sugar Hill Gang and then part of Tackhead. So, and he's still around. He's still doing stuff. And I'm working with those guys now on other projects. Oh, it's super funny.
Back to some of these bands. I did want to tell you, because you mentioned Ministry. To this day, I have seen Ministry a total of one time, because I wasn't into electronic and dance at the time, or industrial or any of that. I'm gaining an appreciation for it now, but at the time, I wanted big guitars and things. So I saw Ministry at Lollapalooza in 92. To this day.
Oh, that's probably a good time to see him.
It was the loudest band I've ever seen. And they were outdoors. And I had to hold my ears because they were so freaking loud. We were outdoors on a ski slope.
They were trying to bury their electronic bass like nobody's business. They're like, we're not an electronic band. Look at us. We got guitars. And we're loud.
Exactly.
Al spent a lot of time trying to bury that electronic world that he was in.
It was insane. I mean, I couldn't even tell when one song ended and another began. It was just that.
Oh, my God.
It was amazing.
We opened for him as Less Than Seven probably 3 times. And it was interesting because they were getting worse and worse, in my opinion, because they were turning more into a metal band. I'm like, wait, we just left all that shit.
Yeah.
Like, what's happened to all this good electronic shit? Sure, you got electronics in it, but like more guitars doesn't bury it.
Exactly. And so you mentioned Level 7. How did that?
Less than seven.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I looked at my. I have it
because actually, I'm going to tell you this before you say that. That fucking name is so problematic. Every decade, everybody's like less than 7, less song, like all fucking variants. I'm like, it's okay. It's a terrible name. It's okay, but it's just endured, you know.
I have it. It's funny because I have it written down once, and then I'll and this happens in all my notes for everybody. I'll abbreviate things. And so it's abbreviated as just L7. So totally different band.
L7 came along later that took the name, fuckers.
Exactly.
Like, we were already there.
Come on. Yeah, well, you were throwing bloody tampons at people at least. At least not that I don't think you were.
Exactly. I wish we were. God damn it.
You probably would have made even more headlines than L7 if you did that. How did that band get started? How did you meet? Well, it's David Wayne Prampin and Wyn Martin, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a couple of things happened. So between leaving, like I'd been in so many like cover bands before then, and we did some original songs and stuff. But I was getting sick of working in bands that were dysfunctional. And so when I started doing electronic music, one of the things I liked about it was the freedom of it. Was like, it's just me. I can figure it out. Like what I like live and die by my own whatever I make.
Right.
You know. And so, but I could make it happen. And so also, I was way into electronics. And again, just contextualize, like Texas is not like absorbing electronic shit at this time.
Right.
It's guitar rock and Styx is big, and like in fucking, I don't know, Poison and bands like that.
It's ZZ Top.
Just noise. Yeah, ZZ Top. Well, I don't want to kick them, but like, sure, like that's the fucking thing. Like they hadn't even done electronic yet.
Yeah.
And so it's like kind of the outsider shit. And so when I was doing that, I wanted to work by myself. And so I started doing electronic music, which allowed me to do that technologically because MIDI was coming in. And so I could use drum machines. I could use synths. I could use sequencers and stuff. And this is all kind of new stuff at this point. Even though people had been using it since the 70s, it had mainstreamed a little bit more from people like me. And I'm, I work at a crappy record store making $2 an hour or whatever the fucking job wage was at the $2.15, I think it was, or something.
Right.
And so, but I'm buying gear whenever I can. And so I had been from about 86 to about 88. I was doing it pretty seriously. And I had a couple of different guys. I had a different singer come in for lesson 7 after I was like, I really want to do this industrial project with a lot of noise and guitars and stuff. And I didn't know what it was going to be yet, but I had a singer come in for my old metal band. And it didn't work out so good. And so he went away, and then I got this guy to play big industrial drums for me and stuff. And then he ended up dying of heroin overdose, sadly. Jasper Burns. I love that kid. He was great. He was only in the band for a couple of months, but he was a friend of mine for a long time. But so by the time 88 rolled around, I was really ready to I wanted more fill out, and I wanted to write better songs, and I knew I couldn't do that by myself. And so I started to search out, and I'd been working with this guy, David Wayne, who also goes by David Starfire now. And so he had been producing my stuff, but we'd just been working together in his home studio. We both had 4-track recorders. And so we just worked back and forth, and he was in a synth pop band. And so I finally just got him to come into the band. It was like, play acoustic guitar, play bass, doing these things, and you can still do your project. And then we found this other guy, Win Martin, who was in Energy Fools at the time, and still has brought that back to, he does a lot of remixes for us. He's a really good musician. And so I brought those two guys in, and we just kind of started to, it started to move real fast at that point.
You look a little bit worried. A little bit worried. Well, I am, Chaplain. Just a little bit.
We went from like rehearsals to fucking doing shows within like a couple of weeks, and then started opening for bands like within a couple of months. It moved real fast because we were an anomaly. Not because we were necessarily good. I ain't going to lie about that. Like, we weren't necessarily good, but we were an anomaly. Like punk funk was big and indie rock was big. Like Husker Du would be the big band. Minutemen were the big bands in Texas, and there was a lot of regional bands. And so we were outsiders, but because we were the only band really doing it in this way, it just became like open for this band, open for this band, open for that band. So all of a sudden we started getting paired with fans, and we started doing a lot of shows, and we started we were rehearsing live is what we were doing, trying to become good.
Okay.
And we ended up opening for touring with Skinny Puppy 5 months after forming in 1988. And we did the Vivisect 6 tour with them.
Oh, wow.
So,
and now they're on their final farewell tour now, aren't they?
Truly are, yeah. And so that tour really inspired me. I actually became vegan and vegetarian at that time and started working on political and animal rights issues and environmental issues from about then. I'd already been political, but I was because that was the whole thing about Lesson 7 was it's a political mission as much as it was a musical mission, because it was a chance for us to table at events and to talk about issues from the stage, which I did a lot, like feminism and animal rights, which was like in Texas was a hard thing to talk about. So we just did that. Again, not trying to blow our, say we were awesome, but we just, because of, circumstances and things, we just got shoved into these things, and it was like, it just worked out good. It moved fast. So Skinny Puppy, we did that tour, came back, and then ended up opening for Ministry and Revolting Cocks and Meet Me Manifesto and Severed Heads. And I mean, literally that list just goes on and on and on, of all those bands.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
if I said it was like 40 bands, I wouldn't be lying to you. Swans, we played Swans, we Liebach, Clan of Zymox. I mean, you name them. Every band that toured, we were playing with them. We didn't do shit to make it happen.
Well, you just named half the discography of a bunch of my college roommates right there.
Of course, right? Exactly. Like, oh yeah, we're opening for those guys next Friday.
Yeah, Cop Shoot Cop. Yeah, I know those guys.
Yeah, exactly. And then by the time 92 rolled around, I just laughed. I was fucking sick of the music industry. We toured with Nine Inch Nails by then in 1990.
Yeah,
I'd opened for so many bands. We'd done so many tours ourselves. I was so sick of going out for 6 weeks at a time and coming back. I was raising a family and it was like coming back with the same amount of money or no money and fucking so many people in the industry that were shitbags. We got fucked by the record labels. We got fucked by the management companies, the fucking publicity people, just because of ignorance on our part. And so it was a grind. I just fucking laughed. I just quit in 92. I walked away
from the whole industry.
Yeah, I totally did. I just closed the door and said goodbye. Fuck everybody.
Man, I was going to ask you about that. You just rolled right into it. So was that when you started doing more activism at that point? Was that what you were focused on?
It kind of was. I mean, activism was already happening since about 85. You know, I've always done political work. And again, I don't have the deepest knowledge. I'm learning. And music, this is the important thing about music. It helped me to discover the world. You know, like I want to say this with all sincerity is that more than books, music really helped me discover the world, relationships and the politics of the world and the economies of the world and just the way we relate to things. I really discovered it through music and the culture industry, not industry, but the culture world. And I'm not saying it was necessarily healthy, but it was something that was really important to me. And so when I left, I was really burned out. I mean, you have to think, by that time I was in my mid-20s. I'd started when I was 12.
Yeah, that's
I'd already
true.
I've been grinding it for a long time without much success, not choosing to be a pop star. And bands around me that were shitty were getting $300,000 record deals. Yeah. Even though they'd never recouped that money, they were like $150,000 deals again and again and again. I was like, man, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, like, because I don't want to make that music. It sucks. It truly sucks. I'm a little more kind now. I'm like, oh, it wasn't so bad, but I was you know, trying to come up. You know?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Anyway, I wasn't jealous. I was just like, I didn't understand it. And I was like, I got to figure out something else. Because I always wanted to use music back then as a stepping off to other things like writing, and because I'm a writer. I write all the time. I've written multiple books. We'll talk about that and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I have fucking successful books. I mean, like outside of fucking music, I've written books I've toured the country, the world for years.
Wow.
So that's a whole other thing. And so, I mean, it's just and so I left and I went into the antique business, which I'd already been in for a long time, and trying to figure out how to make money. I left the record store after 6 years and I opened my first art gallery in 1995 and then my second one in 1996 and started doing that.
Oh, awesome.
And then activism for serious came around in about 1999. I got really serious and I sold the business in 2001 and started working on activism kind of stuff full time. So yeah, man, I'm the most weirdest dude you're going to talk to about anybody's life. I promise you.
I love it though. It's fascinating.
A lot of fucking eras, man. A lot of eras. So just to back up, I was in the antique business, right? So this is the weird thing. Like, I didn't just sell like old rusty shit. I sold $80,000 chairs and $40,000 paintings and I was filling museums and corporate collections and private collections. Like I was serious about it. I was discovering people who hadn't been discovered in mid-century modern, whether visual art or their furniture or their design work, blueprints, extremely rare stuff, because that's the way my brain works.
You weren't in Boston around 1990 with the Gardner Museum?
No.
Okay.
No, I sold to.
You didn't steal $200 million?
I sold to the Dallas Museum, the Fort Worth Museum, the Wilhelm Rhein Museum in Germany, to the MoMA in New York. I sold to High Museum in Atlanta. I sold them collection pieces. I was
just watching
in addition to other shit.
I was just watching.
What happened at the Gardner Museum?
Oh, did you? I was just watching the Netflix special. This is a robbery for the huge art heist.
Oh shit! No! Oh my god! No!
I just had to make sure.
But the thing is, I'm not even bragging about this stuff, but it's just like an era. It did good. I was really sick of it, and I really started to hate my clients because it was like it's mostly wealthy people and wealthy corporations and stuff. And I really fucking hated them. I wanted to be stable because I grew up working class poor, and I wanted to be stable, and so I wanted to do these things. And I started organizing out of my store, and my business partners hated it. They really did. I was organizing all this political shit out of it, fundraisers and things, and they just didn't like it. They weren't on board with it, and so I was like, all right, I'll get out of it. And I sold my interest in the business in 2001. Moved to Austin and then just started working for nonprofits. I worked on the actions teams a lot. I didn't work for campaigners, but I worked on the actions teams. And again, while I'm doing this, so I work for Greenpeace, Rainforest Action Network, Ruckus Society, later 360. And so I'd be paid, one of the guys paid that you'd see like hanging off the bridge or hanging off of a building with a banner.
Yeah.
That was me. I was either coordinating it or doing it.
Wow.
So it was that kind of dumb shit. At the same time, I was like fighting the destruction of I didn't want them to destroy the natural forests, and I was sick of factory farming, so I was fighting against those things. And along the way, after 2001, I became listed as a domestic terrorist. And so I couldn't fly many places in the United States. And I mean, I don't know how much this is interesting in a music show, but like it was just part of the landscape of it all. And so I fought against fascism. So like,
I wanted to know more about you, so it's not just the music. So this is all fascinating to me.
And the thing is, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I don't fucking care anymore. I'm just telling you, these are just stories now. And so basically I was hunted by Department of Homeland Security for 10 years.
Wow.
So it became a New York Times article. I was on the front page of the New York Times in 2011, if you want to know. So explains the whole fucking thing in some ways.
Wow.
And I was able to translate that into stories. And when 2005 happened, so I was still a domestic terrorist from about 2001 to about 2010 or 11. I was under investigation, and it was hard. I had a team of lawyers. Yeah, I say it. I can say it all funny now, but it was really hard time.
I can imagine.
In 2005, I took up arms against white supremacists in New Orleans right after Hurricane Katrina, and that really put me on the radar because me and a bunch of black guys were like, "You're not killing any more black people in this community. I'll fucking shoot you." Yeah. And so we started an armed defense group, and so all these things ended up, and then a friend of mine turned into was an FBI informant and tried to put me in prison. Ended up putting 2 other friends of mine in prison, and about 8 or 9 friends of mine went into prison. Good. And you're talking about basically for property destruction. Wow. Basically. And so there was it's just an interesting time. But what happened was I started this organization in 2005 called the Common Ground Collective after Hurricane Katrina. Right. And we had 350,000 volunteers come through, and we started the largest anarchist-inspired project in modern U.S. history. And that's not a bragging statement. That is the fucking truth. We had, at any time, we could have 5,000 or 10,000 people on the ground working on anarchist projects, stopping the police from murdering people, all the way to building healthcare clinics that became full-time clinics, feeding people, gutting houses. We were doing it all, but we were resisting. We weren't just saying, "Oh, let's keep our money." And like, fuck it, I'll say it. Dave Chappelle, Bruce Springsteen, Bonnie Raitt, Michael Moore gave us hundreds of thousands of dollars. Wow. Sean Penn, they came to, I'm talking about a dirty anarchist project that kept the money in a shoebox. Right. They would give us checks. And in fact, Bruce Springsteen's wife told Patty Scalifa, she wrote us about a year after they donated some money. She's like, "Hey man, we gave you guys $25,000 and you guys haven't cashed the check." And we're like, "Oh, we're just saving it," but we had to go look for it. It was in a goddamn shoebox. You know what I mean? It's like Dave Chappelle. Like, it was like all these guys. It was like they were way into what we were doing, and it wasn't a celebrity fucking event. People were going through hard, difficult things in a fucked up situation, and these people said, "You need money to do this, and we recognize the nonprofit system, and the Red Cross is going to fuck everybody, so we're going to support you in doing it." And so that's what we did. So that's the truth of that.
That's incredible.
So I had a lot of post-traumatic stress from it. It was a very stressful time. Oh, and so again, I was terrorist during this time, and this guy was an informant, and so he was informing and causing all these problems. He's a famous guy in his own world in the right-wing ecosphere because they love him now. And I'm not even going to mention his name, but it's just interesting that all happened. And then by the time the end of it came, I'd written 2 books out of it about the Katrina experience and about guns in the United States in a way that had never been explored, that became bestsellers. So my first book, Black Flags and Windmills, sold about 15,000 copies. And my second book, Setting Sights, sold about 12,000 copies so far.
Nice.
And my first book, I was able to tour on it for 5 years, which brings me back to music. So I'm touring around the country from 2011 to about 2017, and all these people are showing up at my shows. I'm having between 200 and 1,000 people show up. I'm speaking at colleges all over the country. I'm like in Canada and England and Mexico, and I'm doing all this stuff. And I'm doing 200 events a year.
Wow.
Talking about ideas of how we organize together and how to, when the state fails and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden kids started asking me like, hey man, you're in this industrial band. I was like, what? And so all these people are talking about this stuff. It's just remnants of stuff because we were on a YouTube video, and then there was some MySpace stuff, and there was just some random. There wasn't very much stuff, and Lesson 7 was gone. Nobody promoted. Everybody went on, like to go do other projects and stuff. And so I started to see value in it with a younger audience, and so I was like, well, maybe there's some value in releasing it. And some people that were bigger musicians, they still are, like this guy Soul, who's a rapper, and this guy Time, who's a rapper, who are famous in their worlds. Soul started Anticon Records in 1999. He's worked with everybody. If I just named it, if I went down the list, it's too long to go. He's just a white rapper who's been around for a long time. And him and this kid, Chris Steele, Time, both encouraged me a lot to do music. And so that was really the kind of impetus to start. By 2016, Tim Soul is doing a record with DJ Payne One, who worked with Chuck D and Public Enemies, but he has a platinum record with Lil Weezy and a bunch of people. And he's like, but they work together, and they're both anarchists, and they like to do that. And like they do these records that are really political and real good, just really good, outside of what DJ Payne One does for himself. And so he was like, hey man, do you want to guest on this record? And I was like, oh hell yes, I'd love to guest on a record with you. You're my friend. I love you. It's political. Oh my gosh. And so I'm like, all right, man, when am I going to fly up and get in the studio? I'm excited about this. I'm like, oh man, 2016, man, get in the studio, man. I'll get on the mic. It's going to be awesome. He's like, no, bro. He's like, just record it in your phone.
Oh, God. Wow. Oh.
He's like, dude, it's the modern age. So I'm like, literally record my verse in the phone.
That's insane.
But it was cool because I got to work with Soul and DJ Payne One and Chris Hanna from Propaganda, all kind of heroes in my world at that in these times, of Propaganda from a long time ago. And so we all worked together on this song, and I have a minor part in it. I'm super happy, and it just kind of begins to unfold in that way. I start re-releasing my old stuff, which leads me to, by 2017, start re-releasing my old music. And I realized that like Lesson 7 as a project, or Corporate Uncle, or Audio Assault, these 3 projects I don't have any of the music anymore. I've given away the tapes, the DVDs, the records. I give no fucks. When I close the door, I say goodbye.
Apparently so, yeah.
So I say goodbye to, and it was like, and so many eras, man, again, so many eras. And so I'm like, fuck, man. I only have these 5 songs. I'm like, but I think we did a lot more than that. And so I put out on social media, I was like, hey man, does anybody have my old music? And people started sending me shit from around the world. Songs I'd forgotten about, songs I was like, oh my God, this is a much better version than I have. And just so many demos and things. I'm like, fuck, I can't believe all these people had this stuff. I really appreciate it. We weren't a big band. It was just, it meant something to somebody enough to hang on to it. So all of a sudden I ended up with like 40 songs. It's taken years to do it. And so I just start releasing that stuff. And I'm like, fuck, there's so many other good bands that I was working with that I love. Why don't I release their stuff? And so I was like, oh shit! Next thing I know, it's a fucking record label,
man. So in between this whole time, the time you left and came back, did you do anything musically on your own? I mean, did you write any music? Did you do stuff for yourself, or were you just done completely?
Well, when I left, I was gone for a long time. In about 2002, I started playing guitar. I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn to play guitar. Okay. I'm sitting around a lot of campfires trying to defend forests, so we're out in the woods a lot. And I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to learn to play guitar. A lot of people are playing guitar. So I did that. And I wrote a few songs then, but it was nothing worth keeping. And I wasn't ever thinking I was going to get back into music. Never,
Right.
never
Man.
thinking I was going to get back into music. Not because I was like, it was not when I left, I didn't feel unfulfilled. Like, oh man, I shouldn't have closed that door. I've never thought that. I was just like, you know what? It was just the time. I did that during this time, and then I did this during this time.
And the door's closed.
Did this during this time.
You're done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I sometimes it's whole new sets of people too along the way, you know. And it's not because I just like, fuck you, I hate you. It's because my bandmates are some of the longest, dearest friends I have. The most people I love the most, like literally the most, the guys from those eras. And it's, you know, like I don't think that about high school or college or early work experiences. I don't fucking look for any of those people. I never do. I don't give a fuck. My high school, I give no fucks. Those, you know, like I'm sure there's good people there, but I don't look for them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So by the time I'm doing this, I'm like, even when I started the label, I was like, oh, fuck it. I'll just re-release some of this stuff, make it available because I want to listen to it online. And then I was like, oh, I can just keep doing this. And then I connected with this guy, David May, who was an old friend of mine from the 80s, who had run a record label from the 80s in Dallas from the 80s through the early 2000s before he went to Czechoslovakia to work for this label. Oh, wow. And so he helped me a lot to really build this label. And then that was in 2018, we started working together. I did a 30th anniversary release of Radiation, which was a hit song for Less Than Seven in the clubs. It still is. It's an underground classic. We'd gotten fucked on it, just like all the bands on that label. Never made a penny of it. I'm like, oh my God, fucking people like this song, fuckhead. Yeah. And it's like, so I just re-released it. I was like, fuck it, it's my song. Yeah. I wrote the motherfucker, fuck you. And so I was like, come at me, man. Lawyers, I don't care. And so we did a 30th anniversary thing. I got all these people to remix it, old and new. And it just kind of started making me think about it. And David was like, oh, we could do this. And so he had this whole label of stuff. So we started reissuing all this old Texas electronic and experimental music. It made me think more and more about it. I was like, I should write a book about this, about Texas electronic experimental music from 1975 to about 2000, because Texas has reassessed psychedelic rock, which we were core in, heart of punk, and blues, but fucking country and singer-songwriter stuff. But fucking, for some reason, electronic music is just looked at as this bastard stepchild or something. And so I was like, well, what if we reassess that? And so that kind of became the impetus for the label, and the label being Emergency Hearts, which is a concept that I developed a long time about something about the passion that drives us inside, whether it's to fight oppression and exploitation, to rise up to do that, or to create joy in the world. Emergency Hearts is the thing that's the feeling. It's before you start thinking about it, like, oh, I should do that thing. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing that thing. Yeah. And so anyway, I started the label with that kind of idea, not knowing what I was going to do. And then David May tragically died in a fucking freak accident fire of his making in 2021. Wow. And so sorry. It was hard, man. It was a hard time. And I was like, fuck it, I should just stop this. I don't know what I'm doing. And the thing is, I'm not in the music industry, and I hate the industry. That's why I left. I hated the industry so bad. And all these people are like, you're doing this wrong. You're doing this wrong. But I'm like, maybe not. And I met Mark Stewart along the way, and he gave me a lot. And Mark Stewart of the pop group and stuff. And we had connected on Facebook, and he was like, dude, I like what you're doing. It looks so interesting with the way you're trying to talk about this stuff. And so we started talking, and he really gave me a lot of encouragement during that time to really do something. And like, we're like, how can we release something with you? And he wanted to use his social capital and his cachet to help build the label and help introduce me to people. And so he gave me a lot of stuff that I super appreciate. And I connected with Mark Pistol from Consolidated during that time too, because I wanted him to do a remix. And Consolidated were old friends of mine, although Mark wasn't my friend back then. I had met him. We'd played with Consolidated 2 or 3 times back in the 80s and early 90s. Okay. But then, but Adam Sherburne and I had been friends for a long time, because he was the singer of Consolidated, because he went on to do a lot of political stuff. And so he liked my anarchy stuff. And we when I'd go through Portland, he was always there, and we'd always talk about stuff, and it was good. And so by the, again, that was 2012. So, 10 years later, or whatever it is, 8 years later, Mark Pistol and I are working together, and I start doing consolidated stuff, and I started doing this stuff. And then I'm like, oh, Meet Me Manifesto? Sure.
Yeah.
We'll do that. I was like, oh, Adrian Sherwood? Sure. Let's do this. So I'm working with people that I worked with in the past and the future, just kind of, again, trying to understand what I'm doing and trying to sort my way through the world. There was no master plan, but I'm like, I wanted to recontextualize the political music work that I had done earlier with and make it towards the future. Not because I was like living in the past, because I don't actually fucking care about the past. I truly don't even today. I just like the past because I think it gives us moments to move towards the future. And so working with these people were like legendary. Like I contacted Adrian in 1988 to do a remix, and he wanted like $4,200. Well, now he works like he does like I have like 13 remixes from him. Not at that price, but I'm just saying like things change, right?
Yeah.
Like the world has changed. I mean, like, and so the label has become this thing which is kind of like Smithsonian in its way, which is like, let's reassess electronic experimental music in these ways and talk to these artists who are gone or not really doing things, and then put it in the context of the future. And then the digital world really has shown me that anybody who listens to streaming music doesn't know shit about the old music. And so it's all new to them. I'm talking about casual listeners, not people who are hardcore fans. And so everything is new to them. So an old band from 35 years ago, 40 years ago, 27 years ago, 20 years ago is new to them. And the algorithms treat it the same. And so I was like, once I figured that out in about 2020, I was like, oh my gosh, we can just keep releasing this as new stuff.
Yeah.
And whereas like it's got a shelf life at a record store, they pulled it, the cassette or the CD or whatever. No, it's like it's still there. And you're like, oh, that's big in Indonesia. That's big in Argentina because they never got to hear it.
Right. That's true. That's amazing.
So, man. So anyway, that's the fucking journey, man. Oh my God, thank you for letting me tell you about that part of it all.
Oh man, it's my pleasure. It's been a fascinating story so far. It just seems like you hit a new beginning. So it's really,
we did.
I love it, and then you're so energetic about it and so enthusiastic. I think it's amazing. And I was listening to like Continuum of Time.
Yeah.
Your first solo release from this year, Of Everything and Nothing. And it's has the way you approached writing music changed because of all your experiences.
Right. So Lesson 7 is more the dark wave, goth, industrial project, right?
Yeah.
It's like the flavor that it's always been. Because it was that. I mean, we were I was very inspired by Clan of Xymox a lot. I realize that a lot more now than I did back then. Because I was like, well, who was it? It was like Ministry and Skinny Puppy. I'm sure they did. But it was like, oh no, it's Clan of Xymox. If I listen to Lesson 7 now, I'm like, oh my God, Clan of Xymox. And we played, like just a story, like we played with them in 1990 or 91. And it was like a dream for me. And we got a drummer to play with us. And it was Chris Brenna from Nine Inch Nails, because he had quit Nine Inch Nails at that point.
Oh, wow.
Moved to Dallas to be with a woman. And so he jammed with us for this one song. I mean, this one show with Clan of Xymox, which is like a legendary show in my brain.
Yeah. It's
2,000 people or whatever it was. And so, but yeah, I think that Lesson 7 was the dark wave. And so like the Of Everything and Nothing album gave me, it's kind of what I started from 2016. Like, who was I working with? Because I work with a lot of different people, and definitely, and I was on Mike Watt's show from Pedro. I don't know if you ever know his show, but I was on his show recently. And he's like, yeah, genres don't really matter. And I was like, as a young man, I used to think they always mattered. Like, you are trying to prove who you are in this genre. Right. And he's like, was that the music industry? And I'm like, probably, but I didn't understand that again when I was young. And then by the time, but now I'm just like, I want to work with collaborators I love and then get the message across, whatever that is. Whether it doesn't necessarily mean you're trying to convey something, but just like the feeling, the sentiment, the moment, or the politics or whatever it is. And so I just work with people who are just doing cool shit that I just like, know?
I listen to, and like I said, industrial electronic, it's not something that I'm super familiar with, but I really like stuff like Strip Mall. That's a great track.
It's a great song.
I love it.
Yes.
So
I didn't write it. I just wrote the lyrics, and it's such a good song.
So
Televangel was the first kid who, he's way younger than both of us, and he's been doing stuff for fucking so long.
Really?
He's really famous in his world as a cloud rap producer, and I'd heard that track Strip Mall that he had done, and I do this thing as a writer now when I collaborate with people that already have songs out. I just said, hey man, could I do this song? And because I had social capital as an anarchist, because even though you never heard of me, I'm the most famous anarchist in the United States.
Apparently so.
Whatever that fucking means. So I just said, hey man, I'd really like to sing on this. And I hadn't really done anything by that time, by 2018, 2019. And he said, man, I like your writing and stuff. And he'd used one of my talking points in a song called Emergency Heart, based on my thematic idea of Emergency Heart. Okay. He's like, man, just sing on it. And just sing on that song and this one 800-star constellation and just give it a try. So I just fucking it was like my first chance to get back into it. Again, I didn't change his music. I just sang on his song as it was. Wow. But I started to learn that I like to do this one thing, which is take their song title and just write something around it. I have no idea. I don't ask them what they are doing. They just have a title for their track, and I just write lyrics around it. Oh, wow. And so Strip Mall was one that just came out really good in my head.
That's really cool. So with these collaborations you're doing, are you initiating most of them, or are people coming to you for the most part?
It's both. It's different. There's no most of it. It's always, I have so many songs. I have fucking 40, 50 more songs to release. Wow. It's just like, they just pile up. So I just do them, and then I forget about them for a while. But I'm going to back to Mark Stewart real quick. Yeah. He gave me the validation for this because I realized that this is the way he works on stuff. I didn't have anybody. I've got nobody to look at, because everybody I work with is either professional musicians or totally casual about it. Okay. But the way he approaches it and stuff, I'm like, oh, I see that. So some songs I just provide the lyrics for. Some of them we collab on it and we go back and forth for a long time. Some of them they initiate, some I initiate. Some are parts from other songs. I love to cannibalize songs. I love to cannibalize old and new, because old and new is all new, which is why Emergency Hearts does a lot of remixes. So. Okay. So, and I love Mark Stewart. He's such a cool guy. He was fantastic. Oh, he's great. He's so good. He's a fucking hoot is what he is.
He's got the best laugh too. Holy crap.
He does. So true. I saw Tackhead in 1988 in London. I saw Mark Stewart and Maffia, and then Tackhead. And again, my head exploded. Wow. And then I saw Tackhead again 2 more times, 89, 90. And I'm like, they were so good.
Oh, man. In going through this song, I think I have a favorite off of your album, Bird Song. I love that song. That is so cool. It's my favorite track. So is that all you, or is that a collaboration also?
That's a collaboration with Birth Center, and Birth Center is my son, cool. Milo Harkness Smith. He was a total musician and visual artist into his own world. And he's got, Birth Center has tons of music. We release their music too, but it's fucking good. And I'm not saying that like, oh, it's my son and he's good. No, he's a great artist. He's way better than I am. Wow. But we collaborate occasionally. He's like, you can sing on this one, try this one. And Birdsong was a fun experiment in that. And it was one of those things. Again, the title was the thing that set the tone for it. I don't know what birdsong means. I don't ask him, and I just start making up words and phrases and stuff. And with him especially, I can just give him a pile of stuff, and he'll just take out things. So what you hear is whatever he just chose. I didn't choose any of it.
Wow, that is awesome! That makes it even better.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you like that song. He'll like that too.
It's definitely my favorite, and
his music is really good. And all the heads love his music. Just know that all the musicians, every time they hear his shit, they don't know he's my son, and they're like, holy fuck, that dude Birth Center is good. What's he doing? Like, how is that? You know,
It's in the
his
blood,
approaches
man.
are good.
It's in
his blood.
All right, so I've got another question for you. The song "Emergency Heart," was that before or after the label started?
Before. I had come up with the concept of emergency hearts probably in 2008 or 9. It came from a phrase that this friend of mine at the time had said at a talk one time. And I asked him later, I was like, hey, what does that mean? He's like, I don't even fucking remember saying it. I was like, oh, okay. So I just built this whole concept about, I've written about it many times in many books and stuff, and I'm known for it. And so I hated to commercialize it, but it just seemed like a good place for a good jumping up. Terrible label name, but a great signifier, you know, if you get past that. And and Televangel, Ian, he was the first one. Like before we had even collaborated, he was like, hey, could I use one of your talks? Because that's what people were doing, is they were taking my talking things, because there's a lot of them on YouTube and stuff, and people were taking phrases out of it and putting it over electronic music and noise music and stuff. Again, people, I don't even know who the fuck they were. And it was cool. I was like, oh my gosh, there's some value in this thing. Like, again, I'm isolated. I'm in this political world that doesn't even know about that. I'm worried about being murdered by fascists and being arrested by the fucking government at any moment for my political views. And so I'm like, oh, this is a beautiful thing. And he just took it and he messed up my voice and, you know, and altered it and stuff. But I just love the sentiment of it. And so that's how that started. You know?
Oh, okay. I think it's a great phrase. I mean, it's amazing to me that a phrase that somebody else utters and doesn't even remember can mean so much to somebody else.
That's true. It's so interesting. Yeah. I got in Kevin Danaher. I asked him about it actually a couple of different times. I'm like, do you remember saying this in 2000? He's like, man, I got no. It's just something he said off the top of his head.
It's amazing.
You know, and I can understand that, you know, and it wasn't like he had built this whole concept. It's just two words. Yeah. Really. And I like to mash words together, you know, and so I was like, oh my gosh, those are good words together.
And again, it means something to you, and it made sense to you.
Right.
And you wrote a song and formed a label around it. It's just.
Yeah, but I do this with a lot of stuff. Concrete Age is the same way. My wife is some idea that she had talked about at one point. My wife, Ann Hargness, who was part of Mr. and Mrs. Accident, which is on our label.
Oh, cool.
Long gone band. It was an experimental band in the 80s. And she had said something about Concrete Age one day, and it just resonated with me. Again, it's just like, as a writer, you pick up these things. I write down stuff all the time. I have tons of like titles. I have tons of concepts, you know, like and stuff. And so I'm like, oh, that works together. And so I built this whole thing about this idea about Concrete Age that, you know, like out of those phrases. So
that's fascinating.
It's just an exercise.
So
it's a process.
Do you have any plans to play any of this stuff live and tour at all, or even stay regional and play some of it out?
Well, no, I'm not really. I'm not really looking to do that. That's not really my interest or focus these days. Okay. I actually am avoiding the public in a lot of ways. I'm a very
this is a good podcast to do that on.
Yeah, exactly. I like doing media. You know, like I actually like talking to media more than talking to people, and because I can have more security around stuff. I was almost murdered a few times, and like by the police and by fascists, and so even though like I'm not living in hiding or anything, I still have remnants of that stuff that affect me, and so I don't like to speak in public so much anymore because I don't want to get shot.
That makes sense.
And so, but that said, like I opened for Front 242, which was a bucket list show, because they wouldn't let us open for them in 1991 when they came through. But I was like, I still wanted, and so Lesson 7 ended up opening for them last year, a year ago in October of 2021. And so that was a fun show. The two original band guys couldn't come, so I got some people. I got JG and the Robots and T for 2, this guy Jay Gillian to perform with me, and this woman in this band Dissonance. They're both on our label. I got her to sing with me. And so we just did a different show and it was fun. And I did it again last October, but I'm not trying to bring it back. It's not,
Okay.
it's just not something I'm interested in at this moment. Like I'm saying things could change, you know, but I really like just doing these things and talking to people about ideas and stuff.
And you said you've got so much more in the pipeline. So
I do. Yeah. So lesson 7, we had Continuum of Time, right? So that was like a best of. That's like fan favorites of cover songs and one new song. And then there's 2 more lesson 7 albums. One just came out called Memories of the Future Remixes Black. That just came out the end of December. And that is like remixes of lesson 7 songs by Clan of Zymox, Meet Me Manifesto, Adrian Sherwood, all, you know, contemporaries and stuff, old and new.
That's
and then
awesome.
there's another remixes of Memories of the Futures that's coming out also. Memories of the Futures Red. Again, different sets of people, but same thing. Dead Voices on Air, Clan of Zymox, man, I'm sorry, I'm doing terrible pitching, but just a lot of good people that deserve to be their name. Mark Stewart, you know, like I'm just saying there's a lot of people on it. I'm sorry I can't remember everything off the top of my head. I'm not really a pitcher for shit like that. I just like to talk about things. So that finishes out the kind of lesson 7 stuff for me. There'll be some new lesson 7 remixes and things coming out in the future. I still have Front 242 is going to do a remix.
Oh, nice.
I think Clan of Zymox is doing another remix and some other people. And then I did this political industrial project, which was industrial rap called Audio Assault with a bunch of other good guys. Some of them were in lesson 7, and then we used some other guys that were with us. And that project actually did better than any of our bands back then. It was a shining thing that burned out. And I brought that project back. And so we just did a track with John Wayne Was a Nazi, which was a remake of an old MDC punk rock song, but we made it a hip hop version. And I got Soul, these rappers Soul, Mike Crenshaw and Seema Lee to be on that. I sing on it. Mark Pistol plays guitar. Jason Yawn of Breakfast for Children plays guitar. Chris Dose from Anti-Flag is on it. But Audio Assault I brought back as a project, and so I have new songs coming out with Chuck D and Del the Funky Homo Sapien as name brands I can drop. But also like punk rock favorites like Mike Watt's going to be on it. Chris Dose from Anti-Flag will be on another track. Wow. You know, like it's just an amalgamation. I don't even have, besides putting the songs together, I don't even try to make my vocal parts the biggest parts. I just like putting the shit together. Yeah. And so Audio Assault is going to have a compilation album coming out towards the middle of the year. And then I've been doing this noise project off and on called Corporate Uncle. Right. Since 1985. And so again, doing the same thing. I'm working with new artists who are noise and experimental artists, and then some famous ones, even dead ones. I just did a track with Coil. I don't know if you remember Coil. So even though they're totally dead, they did remixes for 9 Inch Nails.
Oh,
and
okay.
They're a musician for their noise, what they do. And so they're both the guys are dead, but I got permission to use their tracks and interpolated them with some noise project that I had from the time. So their songs are from the 80s, even though they still did songs up until they died in the 2000s. It's 1980s meets 1980s. And then the same with Muslim Gauze. And then I've worked with some newer people like Marisbo, KK Null, who people are still alive doing shit. Yeah. So it's like, it just helps Corporate Uncle, and that'll be out the end of the year too, before that. And it's not because I like this shit's been in the works for a few years. It's not like I'm so prolific. It's just that, piled up enough songs. I should release that as an album. Because we like to, Emergency Hearts, we release a lot of singles. We do. I mean, we have 400 titles. So remember, for 2017, we first released something, but really 2019 until now, we have almost 400 releases. That's more than any minor label and more than many major labels. Oh, for sure. And it's only with a crew of 4 people doing this on the regular. Oh, wow. And I'm the only full-time person, so... God, that's incredible. Just ambitious for stupid reasons. Yeah. Well, I've kept you for quite a while here.
what is the best way for people to find the music and listen to your releases and everything that Emergency Hearts is releasing?
Well, really, the main platforms are emergencyhearts.com, and that's hearts plural, hearts.com. That's our website. I mean, just go there, and it'll lead you to any streaming platform that you are a part of. And then if you want to buy, you can buy merch on there and stuff. I mean, we have all kinds of merch, stickers, T-shirts, all, just usual stuff. But you can also find us on all the streaming platforms, Spotify and all those. And in Bandcamp, too. You can buy merch on Bandcamp, and you can find us on Bandcamp.
Yeah.
So emergencyhearts.com.
Okay.
And then and you can find us on TikTok and Facebook and all the streaming services. I mean, all the platforms we have things going on.
All the social media nonsense that's going on.
The two guys at the label work on that stuff at all. Like I gave up on corporate social media. I actually fucking hate it now. It was great for microcapitalism and promoting for a while, as you understand.
Yeah.
But I got so much where like I've been in media all my life. 45 years I've worked in the media. I was first interviewed at fucking 11 years old. I've been interviewed my whole life, and everything that I do, I get interviewed. It's interesting, and I'm like, it's just a weird fucking thing. But anyway, I just fucking I don't like getting on and promoting shit. What I like is promoting ideas and our hearts and our minds and doing things, and that's the truth of it.
Well, you've got a ton of music coming out. Are you working on any new books, or what else is going on besides?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I had 2 books come out last year. Books on my work that I had been doing already. I've got a couple of books in the works too. I had an art book come out this year called Concrete Age. So. Oh,
nice. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and so it's just those kind of things. And we're doing a book with Mark Spivey of Dead Voices on Air. It's his memoir about his life. And then so Emergency Hearts is not just a record label. We're actually trying to actually besides the digital streaming, I don't really care that much about records. Because the music is the impact, and the form that it takes doesn't really matter. So we make bespoke things like cassettes and CDs and things. But I'm really interested in other esoteric things, like Mark Stewart wants to make a puzzle, and Steve Marsh of Telepathics and a bunch of other projects. He does visual art. So I like those kinds of. I like thinking about that, and that may be where we're headed more than trying to be exclusive vinyl, exclusive CDs. We have those things, but what else could we do? And so I think about it in those ways. If people want to support artists, I don't think necessarily everybody wants to buy a record. They just want to listen to the music and support the artist. And so how do we do that? How do we facilitate that in an environmentally sustainable way, ethical way, and treating everybody well along the way? And when the culture industry is completely collapsed, as everything's so devalued, whether you're an artist, a journalist, a filmmaker, it doesn't matter. It's all devalued.
Oh, absolutely. I know exactly what you're
presenter,
talking about. Yeah.
Yes, it's real. And so it's trying to figure out, instead of complaining about how things have changed, because it used to be that a few people made a lot of money and the rest of us just got fucked. Now it's like everybody can make a little bit of money or get a little bit of exposure. And so I'm trying to figure out, be a spammer or, things that you just don't care about.
Yeah.
And the people on my label and the artists I deal with are all in that same boat. We're all outsiders. Interesting thing about a modern day label too is that I don't actually engage with all the artists that we work with. Sometimes it's through people, and it's so weird. So like Del does a verse on Angelo Moore song. I don't talk to him at all, although it's not rude or anything like that. I can contact him about stuff, but then other people I talk to all day, it's just interesting, But yeah, we work with a lot of hip hop artists, and we got a lot. Cool Keith, we got tracks coming out with him. Soul.
Oh, sweet.
So anyway, there's a bunch. Time, we have a lot of new tracks with him coming out. It's really been nice. Thank you again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, but it is, honestly, it's been my pleasure. It's been so much fun to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Stars in the blackest night.